So I read One World Under Doom, and I have thoughts about it. Okay, maybe that's not clickbaity enough for YouTube. I read One World Under Doom, and it shocked me. Is Marvel dead? I think that should do it. In case you aren't a nerd, last year there was a big tie-in event in Marvel called One World Under Doom, where essentially Doctor Doom just kind of takes over the entire world, as you would expect based off the title. And I just finished it recently because it takes Marvel Unlimited like half a year to update any of its comics. I swear, Marvel, I want to read your comics. You just make it a little difficult sometimes. So the premise of the series is that Doom decides that he wants to prove to everyone that he can solve all of the problems that heroes have been unable to solve for years. So he uses the power that he's gained, because now he's the Sorcerer Supreme as well. Don't worry about it, that happened off screen. Well, in a different comic. And he decides to use that power to make all the world leaders pledge fealty to him and like take over and take control over every single country. So far, this is all pretty standard supervillain stuff, but what made me interested and made me want to read the comic is what happens next. So instead of using control to enslave all the heroes, kill them, whatever, what have you, like whatever a supervillain would normally do, he instead decides to outlaw all warfare. And then he gives everyone access to free healthcare and then free education, like through schools and universities. And then he makes sure that world hunger doesn't exist anymore and that everyone has access to free food. And he abolishes all the borders and creates free association. Basically, Doom just turns the world into a utopia pretty much overnight. And I love this. It's a fascinating moral conundrum to have a villain, a horrible person, be the person who solves all of the problems in the world. And it's also still entirely in character for Doctor Doom. He's a man who is more pride than man. He primarily, at every opportunity, just wants to prove his own glory. So it makes sense that the ultimate way to demonstrate your own glory is to do what the heroes have not been able to for centuries and fix the world. Wow, what a cool premise. I sure hope that it has a compelling conclusion and engages with all of the themes that it brings up. Okay, so I want to start off by saying that I did legitimately enjoy the comic. I think that it has an interesting premise, which is like the whole reason why I read it in the first place. And the only reason that I'm analyzing it as deeply as I am is because it has so much potential to be an amazing series, but just does not do it. This comic had the ability to spark some really interesting discussion about the legitimacy of government, the horrors of capitalism, whether the ends justify the means, the role of heroes in maintaining the status quo. But it just doesn't really do any of that. Sure, it asks the questions, it brings it up, but it doesn't have anything meaningful to say about anything here. The comic feels pathologically uninterested in its own premise, which is tragic. I think the most interesting issue of the series is issue 6, where Mr. Fantastic challenges Doctor Doom to a live Twitch debate over if Doctor Doom is correct that he's making the world a better place. And throughout this debate, Doctor Doom brings up repeated examples of ways that heroes could have saved the world and improved people's lives in a more tangible way than just beating up bad guys, but failed to. Tony Stark could have used his arc reactor to give infinite free energy to the entire world, but instead he just uses it to power his metal gun suit. Hank Pym could have used Pym particles to create essentially infinite food for everyone on the planet, and instead he uses it to get really tiny and go into anthills. Hell, Storm alone could prevent most natural disasters from killing anybody. And Reed Richards has nothing to say to this. It's pretty much all true, and it's a really powerful moment, and it sets up a super interesting question for the heroes that they have to answer, which is, if you have all of this power, you have this genius, you have this technology, Why haven't you done more? But don't worry, you don't have to consider that moral quandary for very long, because it turns out that Dr. Doom has actually been siphoning the life essence of everyone living in Latveria to power all of his magic to have control over the worlds. Thank goodness, there was almost a moral gray area for a second there. The comic never answers these questions. It doesn't even have the heroes grudgingly resolve after Doom is defeated to start using their inventions and their powers to help humanity rather than just punch bad guys. Everything just returns to business as usual after Doom is defeated. There's no more resolution other than the hinting at Dr. Doom coming back. This is why I'm disappointed in One World Under Doom, because it opens a fantastic line of questioning of comic books as a whole and the way that superheroes operate within them, and then just shoots it all down in favor of maintaining the status quo. Now, of course, the reason why superheroes use their powers to punch bad guys rather than solving world hunger is because, generally speaking, punching bad guys does make for a better comic. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with suspending my disbelief because I like reading about heroes punching bad guys. But when you raise the question of why don't they do more than just punch bad guys, in the comic itself, I feel like I deserve maybe a little bit more of an explanation. And there are some really plausible and good explanations for why heroes can't use their powers or their inventions to help people more that are actually really interesting and biting critiques of the current world. For instance, if Tony Stark shared his arc reactor with the rest of the world and created infinite free renewable energy, it probably wouldn't be shared freely and equally amongst everyone, because in the current world we do have access to tons of free renewable energy, and it isn't shared evenly because companies lobby against it. It doesn't matter if Hank Pym could create infinite food to solve world hunger, because we already have enough food to solve world hunger. The problem isn't the amount of food, it's the way that we distribute it. What the series could have demonstrated is the systemic problems that stop even superheroes from saving people in more meaningful ways than just fighting a supervillain. But instead, we just return to the status quo because, hey, isn't that better than nothing? There's this common trope in comic books and movies and TV shows and books where the villain will have like a really valid point and a really valid critique of society and threaten to make the consumer of media consider nuance for a minute before the narrative just makes the villain do something so plainly and completely evil that you don't have to think about it anymore. Think Killmonger in Black Panther or Zahir in The Legend of Korra. These villains are presented as having some of the right ideas, but just going too far. And it's the same deal with Doom here. Rather than consider actual societal critique, the writers just make the villains so irredeemable that it would be crazy to agree with them, and by proxy, their critiques. And this is important because it's not something that just happens in fiction. Revolutionary figures are constantly being attacked by the media and by those in power for being too radical or too violent or too dangerous. Think Fidel Castro or Malcolm X. It's a tool used by those in power, the elites, those who benefit from the status quo, to quiet discontent. It's pointing at these people and saying, hey, those guys seem pretty radical and pretty mean. You don't want to agree with them, right? You don't want anarchy, do you? One World Under Doom itself makes this argument. In issue 2, when Doom is explaining his plan to his goddaughter Valeria, don't ask, she justifies democracy by saying that the opposite would be anarchy, and anarchy would just result in everyone killing each other. This is some classic Thomas Hobbes bullshit, and it goes unquestioned. Doom agrees with her. He says, yeah, we need one person in power to control everyone, because otherwise we're screwed. This is the closest I think we get to the authors legitimately speaking through a character in this book, and it's not to answer any of the questions or the themes that are proposed by the storyline. It's to say, yeah, actually the status quo is pretty good, because otherwise we wouldn't have people in power to tell people what to do, and everyone would kill each other. Perhaps I'm being too harsh. This isn't necessarily the fault of the writers. The industry itself that all of these stories are being produced by has incentives to not question institutions, to keep any revolutionary messaging as hyper-real media to consume and live out voyeuristically, but to not actually engage with intangible praxis. Except I would say that only Marvel Comics themselves have a perfect example of how to do proper social commentary and a legitimately radical revolutionary story ongoing right now. The Ultimate series takes place in a universe where an alternate reality version of Reed Richards, called The Maker, don't ask, has engineered the entire society to be his perfect design. He has total control over the entire world, and honestly, it doesn't look that different from ours. The Maker serves as a stand-in here for the elite and the powerful of our world, the enriched capitalist class who have reshaped the world to their own desires. Instead of being warriors of the status quo, the titular ultimate superhero team are freedom fighters and revolutionaries attempting to make the world a better place and overthrow the Maker. This book is really good. If you haven't read it already, you should as soon as possible. This book is to Marvel what Andor was to Star Wars, if that makes sense. It's a thoughtful meditation on what it means to be a revolutionary and how to organize a radical movement and how superheroes can be a symbol for societal change. And obviously, it's releasing at a really pertinent time in the world as well. This book has the classic villain punching of most comic books, but it also simultaneously doesn't shy away from looking at the real work that needs to go into legitimate grassroots movements. There's an entire issue where Luke Cage gets himself locked up in a bunch of different prisons and then teaches the prisoners Marxism, then busts them all out. It's amazing. The Ultimates show that it's possible to write subversive, thoughtful, and gloriously hopeful revolutionary ideology in a comic book. So why couldn't One World Under Doom do it? Look, I enjoyed One World Under Doom. Dr. Doom is a super fun character to read, even if the commentary is kind of surface level and disappointing. It at least made me think a lot more about the media I consume, even if that wasn't the actual intent. To give this all a moralizing epilogue or something and wrap it all up, just remember that the media you consume, no matter how radical and transgressive it is not a substitute for actual action. It doesn't matter if One World Under Doom actually delved deeper into any of its themes or talked about anything in a more relevant or more biting critique, because that doesn't change the world. It maybe changes some people's minds, but if you want to do something, get out, get organized, and, fucking save the world.